In the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, the cause of our suffering is ignorance. Some people say that it's desire or it's attachment. Well, I understand the problems with desire, and I understand the problems with attachment. But you can't have those things unless there's a sense of self to undergo these, a self to desire, a self to be attached. So initially, it's that the self arises as separate. A child, a baby rather, an infant does not separate itself. It does not perceive itself as separate. However, a toddler does. And that's when they talk about the terrible twos. The toddler becomes self-aware. I am not that, I am not this, this is what I want. So it's not that the desire or the attachment causes problems, but just the actual manifestation of the human self, the separation between self and other. And in Zen, that's ego. Ego is the act of separating self from other. It's not that we have an ego. We are the ego. We are the act of separating from ourselves and from nature. So we don't have a problem. We are the problem. So there isn't a way to placate this or to add to it. The actual act of separation creates the self, which is good, at the same time creates the problem. So, an awful lot is put on the idea of desire. That we desire things. Well, it's okay to desire things. Of course you will. It's okay to be attached to things. However, we define ourselves by being attached and by our desires. Okay? So, when you think that your desires are going to fulfill you, and that's the first story of the Buddha. Okay? He became a hedonist. He fulfilled all his desires, but it didn't do it. So, you don't get fulfilled through things. And, it's such a common story for somebody to have great success and to destroy their lives because they're never happy, because more, but more doesn't do anything. It doesn't add to the self, and it doesn't relieve the anxiety of life and death, of birth and death. Just the fact you're going to die. Now, attachment, so much is said about this, there's so much attention paid to this. The idea is that you become attached to things, and the universe is always in flux, and it's always in change. In fact, my original teacher in Mahayana Buddhism, Santa Sengupta, his final definition of the essence of Buddhism is life is change. So this idea of being attached to things, you're always going to be disappointed because things come and go. Nothing is solid. Nothing is solid. We are made up of molecules and atoms. We are ever changing. There is not this one existent aspect of self. And that is something the human ego, the idea of self, has such a hard time with because it wants stability, it wants to cling. And that's also what makes religion so appealing to people because don't worry, you're going to be taken care of for eternity, which created my problem. And for most problems, for most people rather, that's a relief. Not for me. But the idea that we can exist forever or things are unchanging is, central to a lot of religions. But if you look deeply, nothing is that way. All right? Everything is always coming into being and going out of being. So the question is, how do we relieve suffering? How do we relieve this alienated sense of self? I know that I am, but I don't know who I am. And that's difficult. However, it's an attempt to stop the constant subject-object bouncing of the mind, living in the future, hoping for the future, thinking about the past, constantly occupying ourselves. We dwell on things just to be self-aware. Most people are incredibly uncomfortable just being in the moment. I want to address that too. Because being in the moment itself can be threatening to the ego, because the ego needs to live in time, and the only way you can live in time is to be separate to have time moving on. But being in the moment is not helpful when you're in the moment of pain, when you're in a terrible situation, when you're in a war zone. I'm going to be in the now. Well, how does that help you? The now is things are blowing up around you, families dying, people are sick. So to just be in the now, or to be in the moment, or to be mindful of the moment, may be that you're mindful of an awful lot of pain. The question is, who is it? Who is it in the moment? What is you? What suffers? What comes into being? And it's, having a deep inquiry into these topics that can help you understand the causal relationship between self, other, universe.